Greetings, stupid nation. Four Legs here. We've had a bit of a rough start with the channel here. A couple of videos got flagged, got banned. We're learning the ropes here. We're figuring out exactly how far we can push the envelope. But we got a bit of a throwback here for you today. We're going to look at Dana Bash, who's once again being pretty stupid. But first, we're going to hit you with Trump's lawyer. Remember Alina Habba? Trump's good-looking lady lawyer, and she calmly dismantled reporters outside the courthouse when they were trying to put him away, and she did it with grace and a little bit of fire. And then we'll check out Dana Bash, showing exactly why corporate media is dying today. She is a prime example of why media needs a complete overhaul, and hopefully Elon and Trump, they're going to overhaul the entire thing. Deep state in the toilet. And unfortunately, Dana Bash puts every single answer right in the toilet as she keeps interrupting, pushing her agenda as usual. But let's start with Trump's lawyer. This lady is sharp as nails, and she's got a sharp tongue too.
On March 17th, Hunter accidentally admits that it was his laptop from hell. The next day, DA Alvin Bragg indicts President Trump. June 8th, an FBI document is released showing that the Ukrainians paid the Biden crime family millions and millions of dollars. The next day, the Mar-a-Lago raid and the Mar-a-Lago indictment. Last week, Hunter Biden's sweetheart plea deal fell through when the judge realized it had blanket immunity. The following day, a superseding indictment against Donald Trump. July 31st, Devin Archer goes to testify in front of the House. That was only after they failed to put him in jail prior to the fact. What happens the next day? The January 6th indictment that we're here for today. This is not a coincidence. This is election interference at its finest against the leading candidate right now for president, for either party. President Trump is under siege in a way that we have never seen before. President Trump and his legal team and everyone on his team will continue to fight, not for him, but for the American people. I'll take some questions.
Thank you. I know the president has called this a witch hunt. You just laid out several examples of that. Any other thoughts that the president has communicated to you in terms of why this is going on and then why he calls it a witch hunt?
I think a witch hunt is really the way that anybody should describe this, because it's not something we've seen in our time. This is not even political. This is beyond that. A witch hunt is when you relentlessly attack your opponent, when you relentlessly attack the thing that you are most afraid of. People are afraid of somebody that cannot be bought by Washington. People are afraid of somebody who is independently wealthy and who has given up his good life to fight for this country. And that frightens a lot of politicians who are career politicians, unfortunately, because he'll get back there, and I know he'll be fighting for every one of us so that this doesn't happen to us.
Case is about free speech, but the special counsel says Trump could have disagreed with the results and talked about it. No crime there. The difference is what he did to try and switch the votes.
So what is it that he did to try and switch the votes that you refer to? By bringing cases, by using the law in an appropriate manner, unlike what we're sitting here today seeing. This is not appropriate. What President Trump did is he said, go patriotically and peacefully and protest. That is an American right. That is why we are America and we are not a third world country. Although I will say that today, I don't feel very much like we are in America.
Now, I know a lot of people out there probably think that Trump is done with all of his court cases and whatnot. That is not the case whatsoever. I think he's going to come out on top in the end run, but he's still dealing with Alvin Bragg. He's still dealing with a lot of stuff. He's still going to have to cross those T's and dot those I's, and it might be something that does end up screwing with him getting into office, but very, very minimal chance. I think Mitch McConnell and this vote that's happening probably today or the next day, that's going to be the big thing as to the Speaker of the House. Hopefully, John Cornyn does not get in there. And our lovely lady lawyer here doing a great job defending the Trump and the fact that he did not cause the insurrection, and even using that word. I mean, it's just ridiculous. You know what? I'm not going to use that word. It's like the opposite of Voldemort, right? When you don't use the word or fear of the word gives power over it. Well, I have no fear of this word. We shouldn't use it at all. Never use it to refer to that day, January 6th, ever again. And maybe we can take away some of their power. But let's let Miss Habba take it away here some more.
Yes.
This case should go forward before or after the 2024 presidential election?
I think that every court needs to look at this as a whole, right? It's not about the January 6th case. It's about the fact that in the matter of a couple months, we have seen them try and tie up, and me as an attorney, I've never seen this, tie up one individual who's running a campaign, running for office for president, so that he is in court, in depositions, and distracted, so that he won't properly run for 2024. And frankly, it's not going to work.
Is the legal team going to argue that the election was stolen?
I don't think that that's the argument that needs to be made. I think that anybody that believes that is misreading this. The truth is, as an American, there were questions that he had regarding the election integrity. We've seen documents come out, we've seen documentaries come out showing that there were issues with the election. And frankly, by bringing this, I don't think Jack Smith really thought it through. There only has to be proof that, number one, President Trump believed that this election was not completely honest. And number two, Jack Smith has opened himself up to a can of worms that we can now look at and really examine.
If you believe that he's innocent and that this is all a setup, why not bring it to trial as soon as possible before the election so that you can clear his name?
Yeah, I would love to do that, but there's something called discovery. And when somebody wants to say that the 2020 election was perfect and that President Trump has no right to object to it, we've got to go show them all the facts. And there's a lot of facts to show. So everybody has their time. And to say that Donald Trump should then be rushed and not be given the same fair proceeding that anybody else is just, frankly, un-American. It's not fair. It's not the way our system works.
A lot of the lawyers who helped him try to overturn the election are unnamed co-conspirators in the indictment. Jenna Ellis isn't. Why do you think that is?
I'm not going to speak to co-conspirators or anybody else. I represent President Trump.
Let's go one more.
Lena, there are a number of, there's testimony and there's a number of aides that have said that the president was made aware that he lost the election and yet continued to argue that it was stolen from him. How do you reconcile those two things?
Well, I think that everybody was made aware that he lost the election, but that doesn't mean that that was the only advice he was given. As anybody understands what happens in the Oval Office, there are a numerous amount of advisors and politicians and lawyers, not just one or two, that are giving you advice and telling you what they believe is true. So he may not agree with Mike Pence. He may not agree with one of his lawyers, but that doesn't mean that there weren't other people advising him exactly the opposite. And the president has a right, as every one of us do, to listen to several opinions and make their decision.
I remember hearing Hillary Clinton and Stacey Abrams argue their elections were not right.
Absolutely.
I mean, and the weaponization of the DOJ didn't happen then.
No, of course not. But if your last name's Trump, it's very different. So Hillary Clinton could have a problem when she lost the election, and we could have a complete liberal meltdown, as we all saw. But when we have dignified disagreements, we take them to court. We say, do things patriotically and peacefully. He's to blame for things that he did not himself do. And that's what we're seeing. Frankly, folks, this is not about that. This is about politics. This is about 2024. Period. The end.
Great clip there from Blaze TV. Follow Blaze TV on YouTube if you get a chance, guys. And now we're going to follow it up with Dana Bash here, who I think has the perfect name because she just bashes people over the head with her narrative and her rhetoric. She will not let people answer questions, and she's being insufferable like usual.
This weekend, the judge rejected your request for 3 more days to consider the special counsel's proposed rules for how to handle evidence. The proposed protective order that would let Trump use some sensitive information but not take that information with him. Will you agree to that?
Well, first of all, this protective order that's being suggested by the Biden administration is an effort to keep from the press important non-sensitive information that the Biden administration has that may speak to
This isn't by the Biden administration. This is by the special independent counsel.
No, here for this reason, no. The independent counsel, it's not independent, it's special counsel, has to get the approval of Merrick Garland in order to go forward. Joe Biden said in November 2022 that he wanted to see President Trump prosecuted and taken out of this race.
There's
so it
no,
is the Biden
I'm just going to stop you because there's no evidence
but the
that
bottom line is,
Joe Biden is involved in this. And you're right, it's a special counsel. Let's just stick to the question. Do you believe that this is something that you'll agree to?
The point is that we will not agree to keeping information that's not sensitive from the press. The press and the American people in a campaign season have a right to know what the evidence is in this case, provided that this evidence is not protected otherwise. So we're going to oppose it, as we have. But for whatever reason, these lawyers on the prosecution team want to keep that from the press.
Well, won't the evidence come out in trial anyway?
That the press, some of it will, not all of it. I'm shocked that the press isn't lined up objecting to this protective order, because not only is President Trump being attacked for his First Amendment rights, now these prosecutors are trying to impinge on the freedom of the press.
Okay, let's stick to, I appreciate you trying to stick up for us.
What's happening. I'm telling you.
I appreciate you trying to stick up for us, but let's talk about the actual
I'm telling you what's going on right
substance
now.
of what they were trying to do in the filing, which was try to make the point not only that they want to keep the discovery information, what the witnesses said, for the time being quiet, but also he made pretty clear, the special counsel, that the idea that the former president is calling him deranged and mentally ill is something that maybe shouldn't be happening. So let me ask you, as his attorney in this criminal case, do you want your client to stop speaking publicly like this? Using terms like that. This case was brought by the Biden administration in the middle of a political campaign, and with the realization that people are out there campaigning for office. I'm not involved in the campaign. I'm involved in representing. Totally understand.
Mr.
You're
Trump
not his campaign manager. You are his lawyer. As his lawyer, would you want a client to say things like this about the special counsel?
One thing that we are going to do is fight this very, very unusual, outside of the bounds, criminal prosecution of First Amendment rights vigorously in court. My focus is on addressing the issues. One of the issues that the Biden administration will have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt is that Donald Trump had corrupt intent, had criminal intent when he protested the results of the 2020 election. That's core freedom of speech. That's
okay,
core
let's talk about this. You've talked
which
about
is protected
freedom of speech
under our Constitution.
You've talked about freedom of speech a lot. I want you to listen to what Donald Trump's own former Attorney General said about that argument.
I really don't think that's a valid argument. He can say whatever he wants. He can even lie. He can even tell people that the election was stolen when he knew better. Free speech doesn't give you the right to engage in a fraudulent conspiracy.
Your response?
Well, first of all, there was no fraudulent conspiracy. That's part of the reality of the defense. What President Trump was entitled to do, and what Mr. Barr misses, and I'm not sure he's read all the cases, but when it comes to political speech, you can not only advocate for a position, but you can take action. You can petition. You can ask even your vice president to pause the vote for a period of time in order to allow the states to recertify.
But you can't break the law, which is what this indictment alleges.
What was it?
It alleges that he caused actions like approving fake.
What was it?
I'll tell you what the indictment. I'll tell you what the indictment says. The indictment says that he attempted to cause actions like approving fake electors, opening sham fraud investigations, and obstructing the certification of the election. Whether he can prove that, that's going to happen in the trial. I'm just saying what's in the indictment.
Yeah, but right, and let me take the first thing, the question about electors, okay? Alternate electors are used in every 4-year cycles, okay? The Senate parliamentarian acknowledged to Vice President Pence that they always receive protest alternate electors. None of those electors were counted. Vice President Pence was completely aware of the nature of the
They weren't counted because Mike Pence rejected this scheme. That's why they weren't counted.
Absolutely, and that's how the Of course, and that's how the political process works. But there was no defrauding, there was no trickery, there was no deceit.
Because if Mike Pence had said yes, then that's exactly what would have happened.
No, because...
And that's only one.
Thankfully, with freedom of the press, you have to let me finish, though, because, you know, No, but you asked me a question, and I hope you can let me finish, because the government alleges deceit or trickery, and all of this played out in the open. It's all free speech. There was a Supreme Court decision, Hammerschmidt, which is right on point, that says when you're exercising free speech, you're not engaging in a fraud on the government. And that's what, unfortunately, most people don't understand
That's just one example
now, it's
of
very
the
political.
actions. That's just one example of the actions in this indictment.
But you're entitled.
And this is a long list that we've compiled from the indictment. I mean, it's more than a dozen, not speech, actions that the former president allegedly took.
Like what?
I mean, where do I even start?
What? Tell me.
Asking the Arizona speaker to interfere with ascertaining Arizona's electors. The Justice Department to conduct
a speech.
But any alleged
asking is speech.
But any alleged almost all alleged criminal activity has to do with using words and as speech. And that's listen.
What you don't
this is obviously the defense that you're going to use, and it will be fascinating to see how it works out in a court of law. I want to move on to another issue.
No, I got to tell you though. But you make an interesting point, because you're saying that asking is action. No, asking is aspirational. Asking is not action. It's core free speech. The press should be defending free speech in this case.
Let's talk about something else that you've repeatedly said, and that is that the former president ultimately asked his vice president only for a pause in the electoral count.
Right.
But it followed.
That was one of the things. Ultimately, the final ask. Right. The final ask in the ellipse speech was that, which was President Trump was following the advice of his lawyer.
Okay. The word ultimately, I've heard you use many times. The word ultimately is doing a lot of work in that sentence. I know you're intentionally using the word ultimately because
ultimately because it's the truth.
I know. You're right. It is the truth, because at that point he was asking for a pause, but it's only because for many other asks before that, what the former president was asking Mike Pence to do was to completely stop it and reject it. And that is the point that Mike Pence is making. It's that it got to the point where he said pause because Mike Pence says, I'm not going to reject it. Sure.
Okay. So what we have, and many people don't understand this, is a memo from John Eastman, an esteemed constitutional scholar, laying out a number of scenarios. Those scenarios were presented to Vice President Pence. He considered them, and as a constitutional matter, he rejected them. One of the last and the ultimate requests that President Trump made was to pause the voting for 10 days to allow the states to recertify or certify or audit, and Mr. Pence rejected that as well. After that, there was a peaceful transition of power. So that's how the constitutional works.
Okay. What happened on January 6th was not peaceful. I want to ask you something about John Eastman, because you've talked a lot about how he's a respected constitutional attorney.
The transfer of power was certainly peaceful.
Did you see what happened on January 6th? Did that look peaceful?
And by the way, did you? I'm not saying that was in any way inappropriate, but the ultimate power of the presidency was transferred to Mr. Biden.
I just want to quickly ask about John Eastman. John Eastman said, according to this indictment, that he actually, even when he was talking to the vice president's counsel, that he thought that his plan to reject the slate of electors would be rejected by the Supreme Court. 9-0.
He thought he was right. And by the way, that proposal was not the ultimate one presented to Vice President Pence. But what happens in the course of a constitutional discussion like this is all legal theories are discussed and analyzed. And once again, what President Trump was doing is within the reality and the realm of free speech. He's asking his vice president, what about taking this course of action? Ultimately, his vice president rejected all of the proposals that were made.
One quick question before I let you go about the trial.
But you have to let me finish. No. One quick response. What President Trump did not do is direct Vice President Pence to do anything. He asked him in an aspirational way. Asking is covered by the First Amendment.